Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Choi. Chief Randolph. Mr. Sibley, Madam Secretary, Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect Commissioner Suthers, Shields, Calanche, and Garcia are present, and we have a quorum. Mr. President.
Thank you. We welcome everyone attending this morning. The Police Commission is committed to ensuring equal access to its meetings. It is requested that individuals who require the services of a translator contact the board secretary no later than the day preceding the meeting. Whenever possible, a translator will be provided. Sign language interpreters, assistive listening devices, or other auxiliary aids and/or services may be provided upon request. To ensure availability, you are advised to make your request at least 72 hours prior to the meeting you wish to attend. All public comment will be heard during item number 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you're free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with the other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinion shall be deemed off topic, and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in the public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting several ways outlined on the agenda. Message to those attending the meeting in person. These meetings are regular meetings between the board, the department, and key stakeholders. Meetings of the Board of Police Commissioners are open to the public. The state's Ralph M. Brown Act affords the public the opportunity to be present at the meetings, hear the presentations and dialogue in real time, and provide feedback via the public comment period. During these meetings, there's a need for the board to carry out public business expeditiously without delays or disruptions. Members of the audience shall not engage in any conduct which causes an actual disruption of the meeting. Those attending in person are reminded that disruptive behavior will be cause for removal. If you disrupt this meeting, you will be provided with only 1 warning to cease disruptive behavior. If you fail to cease such behavior, you will be removed from the meeting. While in the boardroom, members of the audience must be seated. Standing is not permitted. There is 1 correction on the agenda. The closed session item will be item number 5 on the agenda. And with that, at this time, we will move to item number 1, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Randolph.
Good morning. Good morning, Commission President Suthers, Vice President Shields, fellow commissioners, Inspector General Smith, City Attorney De La Guerra, Executive Director Sibley, and of course, members of the community. I'm Assistant Chief Dan Randolph. I am not Chief Choi. As he does each week, I'll report on his significant incidents and events and activities over the last week, our latest crime statistics, and our department personnel strength. I'll start with some significant events. I'd like to share with you an event I'm very proud that we continue to participate in. It's our Police Unity Tour. President Kennedy proclaimed back on May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day in 1962, and it's an honor to local, state, and federal police officers who have died or been disabled in the line of duty. Each year, in addition to memorial ceremonies that are held throughout the country, there are annual national ceremonies in Washington, D.C. From May 9th to the 12th, Los Angeles police officers and other law enforcement officers nationwide participate in this annual Police Unity Tour. The primary objective of this Unity Tour is to raise awareness about the law enforcement officers who have been killed or died in the line of duty. We had 66, I'm proud to say, retired and active, sworn and civilian LAPD personnel that endured a 25-mile, I think it was actually about 255 miles three-day bike ride to honor the nationwide officers that were killed in the line of duty. This event actually had humble roots, much like our Baker to Vegas. It started off with 18 members making that trek to recognize some East Coast members that had died in the line of duty, and now it draws over 2,500 participants. These ceremonies included a candlelight vigil, a wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington Cemetery, the LAPD memorial ceremony at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, and the National Peace Officers Memorial Day ceremony, which President Joe Biden also attended at the U.S. Capitol. Again, I'm proud to see our continued participation in this event as we put special emphasis on the 239 LAPD officers that have died in the line of duty. The second significant event I'd like to comment on is recognizing the month of May. I don't know that we've recognized this as nationally. It's known as Military Appreciation Month. It's a time designated to honor and recognize the contributions, sacrifices, and service of the members of the armed forces, both past and present. We on the LAPD have a military liaison officer, and that was created to assist department employees that serve with the military as members of the National Guard or reserves. That position is staffed by Police Officer 3+1 and retired U.S. Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant Ryan White. Officer White began
Please
his
allow
career
the
with
chief to complete his report. Sorry, Chief, please continue.
Thank you, sir. Officer White began his career with us in 1997 and has worked with steadfast leadership in his capacity as the military liaison officer for the last 10 years. Gunny White is a Purple Heart recipient and an extraordinary member of our department, and I'm proud to say that he's under my command. Give you a few statistics on our veterans and active. We have 241 LAPD employees, both sworn and civilian, currently serving in the Guard or Reserves. We have 2,245 LAPD employees, again, both sworn and civilian, that are military veterans, ranging from the department ranks of police officer all the way up to deputy chief. And, Chief Kowalski is that deputy chief, proud to say, proud to call him a friend. And our members range in military ranks from private to colonel. We traditionally celebrate and honor our military veterans every November during our annual Veterans Day and U.S. Marine Corps birthday celebration and commemoration right here at police headquarters. As a reminder, as we look ahead to this Memorial Day weekend, I know we're not going to have a commission on next Tuesday. Sadly, we are reminded of LAPD officer staff sergeant Joshua Cullens and LAPD officer and who was also a sergeant major, Robert R.J. Cottle. Both those gentlemen were heroes, and they were killed in the year 2010 during their military deployment to Afghanistan. And we will never forget them and the sacrifice that they, to protect us locally and abroad. Officer Cullens was killed while conducting combat operations, and Officer Cottle was killed in a roadside bomb. Both these men, like I said, are heroes, and they are deeply missed, and we will never forget. To all our department employees, I hope you're listening. We are grateful for your combined service and your safety and that you provide to our country and to our city. Thank you again for your courage, strength, and dedication to keeping us safe. The third thing I'd like to comment on is I had the pleasure of attending a hiring seminar at our Amundsen Recruit Training Center on Saturday morning. It was a pleasure to be joined by President Suthers there. I don't mean to speak for him, but I guess I kind of am. We were both, I think, very impressed by the 78 interested candidates that attended the seminar that have expressed an interest to join the ranks of the men and women that make up our department. And I must say, I left there with a little bit of a renewed sense of optimism for our future. It was good to see the eager young men and women that were coming to join our ranks. So perhaps he has further to comment on. The fourth thing I'd like to comment on is kind of in the spirit of one of our core values of quality through continuous improvement. And it was led by Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez and her staff, and I'm so grateful for her leadership and her presence in organizing and being a part of what I'm about to describe. We had a disaster preparedness exercise that she and her staff have been working with our department and the LAFD for the last 3 months. And the objective was to implement a unified command with LAFD and LAPD in preparation for a fire similar to the Porter Ranch fire from 2018. We had multiple battalions from LAFD. We had multiple officers, 70 plus officers, actually looks like well over 100 LAPD officers that were there. We had LAFD search and rescue helicopters, our mounted platoon, DOT, Forest Service, LA County Fire, Rec and Parks, and shelter personnel. It was good to see that the community awareness aspect of this event over the weekend was considerable, and we had multiple information tents set up to show and assist the community in what to do and where to go if this was actually an emergency. And it commenced on Thursday with a command post and went through Friday and Saturday with involving some of our captains, 7 captains and 1 commander. And we had our emergency services division personnel there as directors and critiquers and controllers of the exercise to walk us through and debrief things that went well and things that didn't go well. Primarily with this simulated fire exercise, it was the LAPD participated in door knocks and ingress, egress, security patrol, security reinforcement throughout the exercise. Kind of stayed in our lane as far as law enforcement goes. And I think it was a great exercise. I'd like to see us do it more often. I think it was well received, and I think our personnel really enjoyed the exercise, and I think it'll make us better for when and if, probably if, or actually when, I should say, we have to gather up resources and tackle another fire. So again, thank you. Again, really very appreciative of Councilwoman Rodriguez and her staff for not only the support and participation, but the leadership on this. It was really nice to see. I will discuss a couple items that had significant media attention over the weekend that, well, I'll leave it at that. I think it'll speak for itself about why it garnered so much media attention. On May 17th, at about 04:50 in the morning, Pacific Patrol officers received a radio call of a woman causing a disturbance at Rose Avenue and 4th Avenue. Officers arrived and observed the suspect, this woman, in an aggressive verbal exchange with other community members. The suspect fled into a van and drove away, and she stopped and purposely reversed her van into the officer's police vehicle, causing injuries to an officer as well as vehicle damage. That suspect drove away, and subsequently a vehicle pursuit ensued. During that pursuit, the suspect struck 3 additional police vehicles, several civilian motorists, and finally struck a tractor trailer on the wrong lanes of direction on the 405 freeway. Perhaps you saw it on the news. It was remarkable. She was subsequently taken into custody. We had 9 officer victims that had reported injury. We had 5 damaged police vehicles, all with a damage in greater than $150,000 worth of damage, which we can't afford financially and otherwise. Yesterday, this case was presented to the LA County District Attorney's Office for filing. I think it's still out for filing. We're looking, I think we approached them with 10 felony counts of assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer, 4 additional counts of assault with a deadly weapon on our civilian and community members, and a felony evading charge of 2800 of the California Vehicle Code. And I'm still waiting to hear results of that filing, and I think we should have a decision today on that. Another item that garnered a great deal of media attention, again remarkable, on May 19th over the weekend at approximately 03:30 in the morning, an officer assigned to our Oceanwide Tower security detail was parked at 12th and Fig when she was approached by a male suspect who feigned needing help from the officer. That suspect overcame the officer and pushed her away from the police vehicle. The suspect got in our police vehicle and drove off, dragging the officer approximately 25 feet before she disengaged from her grip on the marked police vehicle. That suspect continued northbound on Figueroa at a high rate of speed before colliding with two vehicles at 8th Street. That suspect kept going, ran into an MTA bike rack, a tree, a utility pole, and then fled the scene at 7th and Figueroa. That suspect was captured, and the suspect was booked for carjacking. I can tell you that our robbery homicide division is handling that case in particular. I talked to them again this morning, and they have presented the case, or they'll be presenting the case today to our Crimes Against Peace Officers section of the CAPOS detail within the LA County District Attorney's Office. And we should have a better understanding of what will be filed today. Still continuing with significant events, we had a couple categorical uses of force over this last week. One of them was a law enforcement related injury, and it's FID case F2624. On this incident on May 18th at approximately 21:05 hours, a person reported that the suspect, who was later identified as Mr. Shalon Smith, while armed with a knife, was inside the Rite Aid pharmacy located at 1744 West 6th Street, arguing with customers. Rampart Division uniform officers responded to the radio call and encountered Mr. Smith, who was still armed with a knife. Officers issued several verbal commands to Smith to drop the knife, but he did not comply. After a short standoff, Mr. Smith raised the knife and appeared to take a step toward the officers, which resulted in the single discharge of the beanbag shotgun round. That projectile struck Mr. Smith in the abdominal area, causing him to immediately fall to the floor. Smith was disarmed, and the team of officers took him into custody without further incident. Mr. Smith was placed under arrest for attempt robbery. An LAFD rescue ambulance responded to the scene and transported Mr. Smith to a local hospital for injuries sustained during the deployment of that beanbag shotgun round. Hospital staff determined that Mr. Smith's liver was lacerated and that he would require hospitalization. After a prolonged medical observation by the staff, Mr. Smith was later treated and released for booking. No officers or community members were reported injured during the incident. A black folding knife, which was 3 inches in length, was recovered at the scene and booked as evidence. And our Force Investigation Division investigators responded to that scene and are investigating that incident. The second categorical use of force that I'll share is we had an officer-involved shooting on May 19th. So on that date, at approximately 18:38 hours, our Southeast Patrol Division uniform officers responded to a radio call on the 100 block of West Colden Avenue for a report of an assault with a deadly weapon suspect. The individual, later identified as Mr. Wilver Blanco, was reported to be armed with a knife in the roadway, possibly under the influence of narcotics, and chasing an elderly male at the location. Upon their arrival, the officers located Mr. Blanco standing behind a vehicle parked on the street, holding a knife in his right hand. The officers stopped their vehicle, deployed behind their respective doors for cover, and ordered Mr. Blanco several times to drop his knife. Mr. Blanco ignored the officer's commands and climbed onto the rear bumper of a parked vehicle. And while still gripping the knife in his right hand, Mr. Blanco stepped off the bumper, assumed a crouched position, and ran toward the passenger officer, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. Blanco was struck by gunfire, collapsed in the roadway, and was taken into custody without further incident. Officers rendered aid to Mr. Blanco upon the arrival of the LAFD personnel, who also rendered aid and assumed care for the officers and transported him to a local hospital where unfortunately he was pronounced deceased a short time later. Notifications to the next of kin were conducted by our representatives from the Family Liaison Section within the Chief of Staff's office. No officers or other community members were injured during this incident, and an 8.5-inch folding knife with a 3.5-inch blade was recovered at the scene. Again, Force Investigation Division investigators responded to that scene, are investigating this incident. Thanks for bearing with me. I know I had several items that I wanted to share. I'll now move on to our crime statistics. And this is, I'll provide an analysis kind of year-to-date through the date of May 18th. Citywide for the week ending of May 18th compared to 2023, violent crime is up 0.4% or a total of 45 crimes. Property crime is down 3.3%, and Part 1 crime is down collectively at 2.5%. As we looked at homicides, we have been seeing a trend downward since the week ending March 16th, 2024, with the year-to-date increase decreasing from 30.8% to just 4.2% over the last 10 weeks. Citywide, there have been 113 homicides through May 18th. Of these, 35 are gang-related compared to 59 of the 106 homicides in 2023 and 73 of 141 homicides in 2022. The city has experienced a year-to-date increase of 6.6% or 7 more homicides compared to 2023, but a 19.9% decrease, which is 28 fewer homicides compared to 2022. I'll talk about victims shot, I should say. Over the past 12 weeks, the year-to-date increase in victims shot has shifted from an increase of 14.7 to a decrease of 10.5%. Citywide, victims shot have decreased by 47 incidents, which is 10.5% compared to 2023, and by 131 incidents compared to 2022. In 2024, there have been 399 victims shot as of May 18th, with Operations South Bureau accounting for 160 of those cases, the highest being in Southeast area, which had 63 incidents. When we look at robberies, we see a different trend. Total robberies have increased from 8.2% to 13.4% over the last 7 weeks. Although robberies with a firearm have been trending downward since the week ending March 9th of 2024, the year-to-date total increase for these incidents decreased from 12% to 0.4% over the last 10 weeks. But as of May 18th, 2024, they are up 1.8%. Total robberies are up 13.4%, which is a difference of 404 compared to 2023, but down 4.5% when we compare to 2022. As we look at burglaries, they've been trending downward since the week ending March 2, despite a slight increase of 0.2 to 2.3% over the last 6 weeks. Over the past 12 weeks, the year-to-date increase in burglaries have decreased from 4.3% to 0.2%. As of May 18th, burglaries are up 2.3% compared to 2023 and 2.2% compared to 2022. Commercial burglaries in 2024 have risen by 1.1% compared to 2023, but are down 5.4% compared to 2022, accounting for a 43.8% of the total burglaries year to date. And then finally, as we look at motor vehicle theft, this has been trending downward since the week ending March 2. Over the past 12 weeks, the year-to-date increase in motor vehicle theft has decreased from 9.6% to 5.0%. As of May 18th, 2024, motor vehicle incidents are up 5.6% compared to the same period in 2023, but down 4.6% compared to 2022. And as I've heard Chief Choi comment before on vehicle theft, those top vehicles remain to be the Kia, Chevrolet, and Hyundai. And finally, our personnel strength, our sworn numbers are 8,821. And so we're down 472 of what we're authorized. Our civilian deployment is 2,633, down 265 from our authorized. And our reserve officers are standing fast at 443, although I'd love to see that number increase. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Chief. And questions or comments from the commission? I'll start with Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you, Chief Randolph. Just a little bit more clarification around the officer who was overtaken by the suspect. Couple of questions around, how we're still involved in the security of that site. What is our deployment, I guess, around that site? And then are officers providing security by themselves? I guess that's a concern. And yeah, just more information around how we're engaged in providing security for that building.
Well, we continue to provide security at that location. We currently deploy 1 supervisor and 8 officers to staff that 24/7. It's taxing on us, but it's obviously a location that's still of a significant importance to the city and to police, and we are utilizing overtime to staff that, and I would say it's minimally staffed. It's such a huge footprint within the city of LA that it takes quite a bit to really police that, and this is, I don't know that we're necessarily blaming deployment on this issue that got this officer hurt and tragically carjacked for her marked black and white police vehicle. I just, again, the suspect feigned that he needed help. He said that he was in fear for his life and asked for help, and then took advantage of our officer at a vulnerable time. So I can't answer why we continue to do that, other than that it's still a priority for us and the department. And Chief Choi is continuing this deployment of.
So there is no anticipated end period when we're not going to be deployed there?
Ma'am, I'm not aware of an end date per se on this deployment.
And since we're using overtime, is the department getting reimbursed for that overtime?
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I could follow up with our fiscal folks and see where how that is impacting us.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm glad the officer's okay. But yeah, I didn't realize that we were still there 24/7.
We are 24/7.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
None, thank you.
Vice President Shields?
Thank you, President Southers, and thank you, Chief Randolph, for that report. And it was good to hear your recognition of both the Police Unity Tour and the service of the department's military veterans. And I think especially, I know that the LAPD has a memorial website for the fallen officers. I'd like to see the department do even more to make sure that department personnel all remember the 239 fallen officers who've died in the line of duty. I know other federal agencies usually send out on the day of, a notice to everyone, kind of reminding them of the circumstances around their deaths. And so that would be something that
Please
I
allow
think
the commissioner to finish her remarks.
that is something I think that the department personnel can benefit from. Also to kind of remind them of some of the most mundane tasks that can lead to death, that would give them more remembrance of that. And I'll echo Commissioner Kalanche's comments about, hoping that both the officer who was involved at the Oceanside incident and also the 9 officers who were hit by the vehicles, that they are recovering quickly and have a speedy recovery. I had a couple questions, kind of unrelated to some of the reports that you have. One is relating to the pro-Palestinian protesters who were attacked by counter-protesters at UCLA. I've had members of both the Arab American community and Muslim community reach out to me about, excuse me, ma'am, if you'd like to step outside, let me finish my question. That is your first warning. Mr. Smith, would you also like to leave the room, or would you like me to finish my question? That is also your first warning. Chief Randolph, in terms of the counter-protesters that were physically attacking pro-Palestinian protesters at UCLA, there's a concern that law enforcement's not doing enough to catch the perpetrators, and I want to understand what role the department is taking in identifying and bringing to justice those who were attacking the protesters.
Well, I can assure you, and first of all, let me back up and thank you for your words and your emphasis on remembering the 239 members in our memorial. I think, in fact, I know our personnel who are listening will appreciate your comments and your renewed emphasis on paying attention to that, because we shouldn't forget. Getting to your, ultimately to your question about what we're doing at UCLA, we're absolutely doing things at UCLA to help them. We're not the lead, to help them help themselves identify the suspects that need to come to justice on this event. I can tell you that we've loaned specialized detectives, two of them, sharp ones, good ones, over to a task force that was put together to solve these crimes. I can tell you that the California Highway Patrol is also involved in this task force. And I know that University of California police officers throughout the state have come down to help investigate these crimes that we are not the lead on. I also know that we loaned, I think, a single detective from West LA to also help with that. So I know that they are combing through digital evidence and looking for, looking to bring justice on that event.
Thank you, Chief. And I understand there's at least been some requests of the FBI also kind of getting involved and joining that task force. And I would welcome both like the federal agencies to investigate this also as a potential federal hate crime to the extent that is something that can be done or advocated for. One question I had, I know that there have been kind of media outlets and activists that have used facial recognition technology in order to identify some of these attackers. And I want to understand whether the department personnel have access to the same type of software that would allow them to quickly identify these individuals as well.
Well, the short answer is no. I can tell you what we do have access to. In circa 2021, we codified a policy on the use of facial recognition technology and what we call photo comparison technology. And under the leadership of Director Liz Rhodes, she sought to memorialize this and give us policy and direction on this. And I can tell you that it's very limited in our sense. We are limited in the sense of what we can use it on, and it would fit this scenario at UCLA. We require that it's a criminal investigation, that we could also use it to mitigate an imminent threat to life. And we can also use it in a limited sense in assisting and identifying a person who is maybe perhaps incapable or otherwise unable to identify oneself.
Excuse me, Chief. Sir, in the blue mask, you're getting your first and last warning to stop disrupting the meeting. Sorry, Chief, please continue.
All right, Mr. President, thank you. As such, where the person is incapacitated, deceased, or severely at risk. So I know that we do use some photo comparison technology, but it's a very limited sense. The database that is searched is the LA County booking photo database, and we are not allowed to use it for non-criminal or purely administrative investigations. We're allowed to use it in a limited sense, and that we're not able to upload our body-worn video or digital in-car video or any kind of other video that we garner via our person or through our technology involving the police. And we also can't submit sketch artist drawings to the system. So it's very limited, and it's not a end-all be-all, oh, look, we have a match, we now have probable cause. It's actually just the opposite. It's really what we would call a pointer system, and requires us to then not rely so much on the AI aspect of it and more rely on the human aspect of the skills of the investigator or investigators that have used this database to do some comparison. We very much include a human being look at the comparison and not rely upon that as any type of probable cause standing alone. So we do have a policy. I know that Director Rhodes and folks from Detective Bureau under Alan Hamilton, I know that they're monitoring the progress of it and looking for changes, and if things change, I know that they've got their finger on the pulse of adapting with the law.
Thank you, Chief. I would be interested in understanding how other departments may use that technology, and if there's differences in how we use it versus them, and also making sure that there are proper safeguards to avoid, improper racial identifications and other things like that. I'd also like to, be kind of kept abreast of the investigation happening at UCLA, so that I have some additional briefings as to the status of that investigation. One additional question that I had relates to some media reporting about how certain law enforcement agencies dispose of weapons. And I just wanted confirmation that the department is not engaged in selling any firearms that they receive through buyback programs or anything like that.
Well, I can assure you and the members of the community and members of the media that we do not, we are prohibited from selling firearms. I know that we've started gun buybacks back in 2009, and we've recovered over 18,000 guns. It's been very widely popular and widely successful, and we as an department under the leadership of Ahmad Zarakani at Gang and Narcotics Division, we're very much kind of an industry standard. We still have departments coming to him to say, hey, how does the LAPD do it? And I can, as I sit here, I can tell you confidently that we do not sell those weapons that we recover to members of the public, nor do we sell them to ourselves as officers. They are destroyed, and they are under the really the watchdog of the California Department of Justice as well. So we're guided by, and they watch over that aspect of it.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. Chief, if I could just follow up on Vice President Shields' comment regarding firearms. There was a story about department-issued weapons that no longer are assigned to an officer, and that report states that LAPD traded or sold 850 firearms. Do you know where that number came from and where those weapons are?
I don't, sir. I don't know the source or any information on that.
Okay.
I will follow up, though.
Please do. Thank you.
Yeah.
Two other items that I'd like to know if we could have some additional information on that weren't in your report. Is there any update or additional arrests in the beating of 15-year-old Jason Rios at Freedom Plaza last Tuesday?
Commission President Southers, I apologize. I do not have an update as I reflect on some of my notes on that case. I will get you one, though.
Okay, thank you. It was a pretty brutal beating, and
Yes.
I know that one person was taken into custody, but there were several people there when it happened. The other item is, last Saturday, May 18th, there was an officer shot at, no hits and no shots fired by the department personnel, but there's a suspect in custody. There's any additional information on that incident?
Yeah, second apology, sir. I don't have additional information on that. I feel ill-prepared, so I apologize.
Okay, if we could just have a follow-up on that incident as well. Thank you.
Yep, will do.
Can I?
Yes, Commissioner Kalanche, go ahead.
Before we move on, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that the commission is hosting a youth forum this Thursday to get input from, it's a citywide youth input session, to get input from youth about the things that are important to them when it comes to the selection of the next chief of police. So just wanted to make that announcement. It's this Thursday at 5 p.m. Thank you. Thank you, President Sun.
We'll now move on to item number 2 on the agenda, public comment. Madam Secretary, please call the first speaker.
The first speaker is Jonathan Foster.
Hello, Jonathan Foster. I'm going to say some things I thought I'd never say here, but first I want to say about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment about carrying a gun. You know, it's not an option; it's a directive that every citizen is to carry a gun. I'm going to piss some people off. You know, the LAPD Commission has been very important. It's provided me a more direct awareness of some things. I want to start with the knife suspect. He charged the officer, so the net gun on this one probably wasn't going to work on this one. But I also wanted to point out at Santa Monica in Santa Monica at 4th and Broadway, there was a stabbing yesterday. One guy's fighting for his life, the other person's injured. And I perform on 3rd Street. I'm worried about it constantly. Say some things about the Catholic Church. You know, the Pope is not supposed to decide the laws here. We, the people, are supposed to decide the law here. The Pope is not supposed to decide to keep the border open for us. And Newsom is going to talk to the Pope in Italy. Thought that was a problem. One thing you thought I'd never say, Dr. Southers for president for the next 10 years, if you'd like to. Vice president, you could stay here too for 10 years, as long as you'd like to. I noticed that they continue to attach the LAPD to the white supremacy. And so I did a bunch of history awareness for myself based on some prominent historians. And I learned that they traded guns for prisoners when they brought the first slaves to the colonies. And the LAPD has told some white supremacy. But this means that the tribes had jails and that there were criminals. That means the tribes had to have had a police department of some type. They would send somebody out to get the criminal. And if you resisted arrest, they would kill you. It happened there too. And then I also, a different topic, in 1865, when slavery ended in the United States of America, the Ottoman Empire was still taking white people and Jews into slavery. But white people had ended slavery. Southers for president. God bless you. Every resisting arrest today, and they continue to resist arrest. There's been long time voices talking about this stuff, and it's on them. Because what I learned at 53 years old, that everyone knows now, today in 2024, that you cannot resist arrest. You can't. Everybody knows. God bless the LAPD. And actually still, again, the Second Amendment with your buyback problem, it's not right. Every citizen is supposed to carry a gun. The Second Amendment is not an option. It's a directive.
Thank you.
Next, we have Steve Riley.
Good morning, all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First, I'd like to say that was the best chief's report I've ever heard.
Chief Randolph, I don't know where the LAPD has been hiding you, but your words were greatly appreciated about National Police Memorial Day, about the fallen, about the Police Unity Tour. Thank you for all who participated. That shows real heart. And I just want to say thank you very much also for recognizing Military Appreciation Month. These all should have been mentioned by Chief Choi last week on Tuesday, but were not. So thank you for mentioning it. It is much appreciated. I know many people are listening, and they will be delighted to hear that it was acknowledged. Thank you, Vice President Shields, also for your acknowledgement of the service. That does not go unnoticed. Memorial Day is coming up. Let's remember our fallen military dead. Last week, on Wednesday, the actual day, Police Memorial Day, I did go by police headquarters, and the flag, sadly, was not at half-mast. I don't know if that was an oversight or an expression of indifference. I tend to think it's an oversight, which should never happen again. So I just want to mention that. Briggs is not here today, Commissioner Briggs, but he mentioned edged weapons and de-escalation and that subject last week. And for the education of the public and the police commission, I highly recommend a video by the martial arts legend, Dan Inosanto, a contemporary of Bruce Lee. And it's called Speed of Knife Attacks. Speed of Knife Attacks. Also, surviving edged weapons. You talk about the subject, but you need to educate yourselves. And I'm talking to Briggs now, even though he's not there. I had this remark prepared before I knew he was absent. The Central OIS at 6th and San Pedro on April 18th. Everybody should take a look at that and see how fast a knife attack can occur. Thank God the sergeant and the other officers and the public were not harmed. The suspect was shot once. And in that case, he had the knife in his hand as he approached. So there was some warning, okay? But sometimes a knife attack happens and there's no warning at all. The blue line flag should be returned to the police station lobbies or wherever the police officers would like to have them displayed. The invitation to join a chief of police selection community input webinar. Apparently one of those took place on Saturday. Where's the advertisement on the lapdonline.org website? I didn't see it. It should have been up there. It's been reported only a dozen people were there and Commissioner Kalanche was there. All the police commissioners should be hearing the input, and I look forward to attending Thursday.
The next speaker, Audrey George.
I apologize to Mark Smith for all the times I've said he does nothing, and I know he's about to be leaving, but he did one report. I just give him accolades for that. Thank you. I noticed you weren't talking about USC and the police response to that, and I was there and saw them kettling the students as they, and in tactical gear. And I think the reason we didn't hear about it is because of your president, Eric Suthers, who has a definite conflict of interest in that matter and should step down. Regarding the SARS report, SARS is just an abomination. It's just a continuation of the kind of anti-terrorism applied to civilians and that you started after 9/11. It surveils and criminalizes poor people, Black and brown people. It tries to destroy the communities that we formed by making people narc on each other and turn each other in. And it relies on the most ridiculous kinds of behavioral analyses, such as preoperative behaviors, like people, like they can know when someone's about to commit a terror terrorist act, or is thinking about committing a crime. It's BS. And this report will just reveal more of it, and we've been waiting forever for this report. There's no excuse for it coming in so late, but it's going to show that it's just an abomination.
Next, we have caller ending 8022. Caller ending 8022, you're on. Okay, we'll move on to the next.
Andrew Graebner.
All right. First of all, I want to ask why none of you are calling Errol out when he yells at people for any disruptions when talking about the protests on college campuses. Since Errol Southers has a conflict of interest and he should be recusing himself and not involving himself in any of this stuff, since he works at USC and probably ordered the sweeps there. The Chiefs report was 25 minutes today or so. I counted it. Like, it's ridiculous length. We got people waiting to speak, and, we're just listening to him go on. We should be able to at least speak for the same amount of time he does. If he's going to take that long, we should all get 25 minutes, because I have much more than 25 minutes of stuff to talk about with you, this commission. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Let's see. We've got a $240,000, advisory to the chief of police. The chief of police has 15 different advisors all getting paid, 6 figures. How many advisors does the chief of police need? Let's see. We have donations from the police foundation, $16,000 for a party, $11,000 for the golf team. Why does the LAPD have a golf team? That should be coming out of if you need to have a golf team, at least take it out of your own budget. And maybe if you pay for your own stuff. You keep asking for so much money, and yet you keep getting these billions of dollars of donations every year. Maybe we should cut the taxpayer money coming to you if you're just going to pay for everything with take so many donations. Maybe we can just set your budget to 0 when you can just take donations. But really, there should just be no donations, no budget. Let's see, $20,000 for goggles. Let's see. We have the suspicious activity reports. You're just using that to, accuse people of being terrorists for no reason other than just profiling and discrimination purposes. Let's see. We have $600 for breakfast with the Riverside County sheriffs. That was the one where, until recently, their sheriff was a former Oath Keeper. We have, the fuck you, Southers. You need to step down and.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. C.
Okay, good morning.
What items would you like to speak on?
All items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I'd like to bring something up here. I've been reading an article here from, it's a couple different places. I read the article. But anyway, let me go into it here. After the California legislature amended state law to allow border crossing illegals to wear police uniforms, the LAPD announced last December it graduated 6 DACA recipients. All right, some illegal aliens getting police jobs, a badge and a gun. That's nice. Really? There's no citizens that wanted those jobs. Let's bring in some. Let's reward the illegal aliens once again, and get their kids jobs. Nice. That's not going to cause any problems, right? Who brings the illegal aliens into our country but the cartels? You think they're not onus to the cartels now? They don't have to, maybe they owe them something here. Come on, that's just ridiculous. Why are we doing that kind of stuff? No wonder the Junipero Serra statue was torn down and nothing happened. Well, I don't think it was the rank and file that decided to do nothing. I believe it was from on high, the upper management of the LAPD said, stand down, and they did nothing. And then the Los Angeles Archdiocese did nothing to put it back up because, they have a problem too with doing the right thing. So, interesting place. Los Angeles is becoming very Marxist, with your fake indigenous groups and this DIE stuff. You guys, it's a ridiculous place to live now, and you want to draw people to the LAPD to have jobs there. Who would want to be an LAPD officer? Look at you guys represent. It's not a good job to go to, really, is it? I mean, what kid's gonna look at this from high school and go, I'd like to be an LAPD officer someday. It looks so great here with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That sounds great. Maybe I'll use my pronouns when I arrest somebody. Hi, I'm Officer Z. I'm here to arrest you. I mean, really? Is that what we're gonna be doing? Maybe the officer will have blue hair. It'd be great, wouldn't it? I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the LAPD. I know there's good officers, but what's happening with the structure and the management of it? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure in June you'll have the gay flag hanging over the main office there. I'm sure you guys will do that. I mean, even though it's the month of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, you'll have a gay flag hanging there, like you guys do every year. Just keep it going down, right? Just rolling. Once it starts rolling downhill or going down the drain, you just flush it the rest of the way, right? So that's what happens. Well, that's it for me. God bless the LAPD.
The next speaker, please, Serrano Richard.
All items?
Thank you.
I'm here to address, for the first time, LAPD Commission. I started my career wanting to be in that blue uniform. Coming out of high school, my father was killed when I was 12, so I wanted to be the person that found that person. I was happy to shake Mike Moore's hand after 41 years, the day he left City Hall. I just ran for city council the last 2 years to make that difference because of retirement at Water and Power. But somehow it seems there's still a gap. That bridge needs to be mended. I worked with Mission Division when they didn't have the finances for tutoring for the kids. I did a car show for them, along with Street Memories in North Hollywood. We closed down the street. It was a beautiful thing. Now they got tutoring there. I'm about to invest some more money before they can get clocks so they can learn how to tell time. I'm okay with that. I ran for city council to make a difference. I didn't want the lobbyist money. I just needed to be that leader that they needed the way I wanted to be. Now that I don't have the carrot in front of me to shut up and sit down, I'm going to make the differences by making outspoken things. Sir, I understand that this is a LAPD commission, but the Hernandez family got attacked last night. McDonald's, it's on the news. Not a mention of them. Lopez, Guzman, same thing. Shot in the back of the head. Not a mention of that. We gotta talk about each other like we are a family, or else that bridge will never be gapped. Now I'm here because I got a citation December 8th. After coming out of church, coming all the way here to go to City Hall to talk to the mayor about helping with the homeless problem. And I'm waiting for a parking. As you know the area, you only got so many meters. Officer's getting in his car. So I wait. What would you do? Put your hazards on, let them know, hey, I'm waiting for the parking. He waves me through. Nope. Comes over to the truck, says, I'm not leaving. I said, okay, let me back up. Parked in the red, waiting for him to go ahead and move. He says, you can't park there. I said, sir, my vehicle's on. I'm a commercial driver. It's called standing. The vehicle's on and occupied. I'm just waiting. You can't do that. Give me your license, you're getting a ticket. Okay, here's your license. Vehicle in front of him moves away. As soon as it moves away, It turns around, comes over and says, now you're under arrest. For what? For prolonging my investigation. He already had my ID. He searched through my wallet, violated 3 of my civil rights under color of authority. The 14th Amendment, I need somebody to help me here, please get the body cam footage because I'm going to court. Now that your internal affairs says there was nothing wrong there. It's right here, but it's hard to police your own. Dominic
So, Chief, would you like to respond so we can?
Choi
Sir, allow the chief to
said
respond.
he was going to make a difference in his community.
Sir, he is. And I can tell you, right behind you is Detective Gayhart, and he will help you.
Okay, and again, I love this blue uniform. I got family in there. Officers on the bounce pad program because we already retiring at this age.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your support, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have Philip Tabby.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So on Saturday, I attended the Chief of Police Selection Community Input Webinar. There's a couple of concerns I have. First, I'm what you call in the know, and I didn't know about the meeting until someone told me about it that morning. Now, I'm not saying I know everything that goes on. However, there were a total of 12 people, as the past caller had mentioned, on this Zoom call, including only 1 police commissioner and other city entities such as the city attorney's office. Only 3 of us, community members, spoke during public comment, and Kalanche on a few occasions commented that we needed to get the word out so more people could give input. Commission, it's your job to make sure this information gets out to the people. In a city of millions, it's unacceptable to not inform the people. It appears you're just checking the box off to say that you held this meeting. To anyone listening about the Chief of Police Selection Community Input Webinar, to anyone listening, the flyer for this webinar will happen again. The flyer states it's going to happen again on Thursday, May 30th at 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Kalanche, you had mentioned there was one for the youth at 5, but no mention of the one at 6. I'm imagining it's going to be the same meeting ID number, 813-0186-2645. Now, as for the new chief selection, we need someone from the outside to run and clean up this department. It's a train wreck. We need a new chief that'll be able to work with everyone in Los Angeles and not beholden to any elected officials, including and not limited to soft on crime Monica Rodriguez, who in the past had way too much access and favors done from our own former chief. Fire Liz Rhodes. God bless the LAPD. I yield the rest of my time.
The next speaker, please, Alethea O'Toole.
Good morning. I wasn't really intending to speak today, but I'd like to thank the panel for being here, for listening to the community, and for giving us a place to be able to speak out. So, just touching really quickly on SARS. I personally was falsely arrested by the San Gabriel Police Department, held at gunpoint and bruised from head to toe. I can tell you it was an extremely dramatic experience, and it took me a long time to be able to appreciate the police department again. That being said, I was mentioning to the chief that I had conceptualized recently an additional training for the police department. This touches on homelessness and then an economic issue, and the sympathy that the police should be bringing to these sorts of situations. So the conceptualized addition to training would be what I call like the 30-day, 45-day challenge, where a new cadet or someone who is interested would be challenged to live on the streets for 30 to 45 days using only GR and food stamps and the services that anybody on the streets would be allowed to use. They wouldn't be able to contact anyone to use their money, their car, their phone. They would simply have to live as a homeless person would for 45 days. Now, maybe there's a bonus involved for them. Maybe there's another way to be able to bring them on board. But I think I've talked to a couple police officers down in Metro, and they kind of like the idea and said it might actually help build sympathy. I know that's challenging, and it would be challenging for people to want to do, but not many people want to be there. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Karen's iPhone. Karen's iPhone, you're on. Okay, we'll move on to the next.
The next speaker, the Red Chief Hunt.
Thank you. I know my car was in there way before a lot of people, but I was like the third one in the room. But in honor and thanks to my brother, 1998, Van Johnson, who was killed on Wilshire Boulevard in Memorial right here. And we worked together from the Sheriff Department to Los Angeles County or Los Angeles City Police Department, you know, in honor of Van Johnson in 1998 motorcycle crash on Wilshire. Here's what's going on. Nobody knows who's running the LAPD right now. It's a train wreck. Nobody knows who's in command. Nobody knows who's getting things done, and it's making you guys look bad. The whole city. If you call your officers and stuff like that, you don't answer the phone. This is a public place. When you call the chief's office, he don't answer the phone. When you call ho, they don't answer the phone. You know, you guys has become a total train wreck, and I don't know what the commissioners and everybody is doing about it, but it needs to stop. If you guys gonna serve and protect the public, you guys gonna serve and protect the public. If you're not, then you just let everybody run wild and stuff like that. You know, and I've tested you guys out with the little things, and you guys can't stop the little things, so they get big. And then when somebody gets shot and stuff like that, or accident, or somebody get killed, you guys want to know why? Because you guys wasn't out there promoting what you guys do, and I'm promoting proactive policing, prevention. You know, and everybody don't get that part of it, but proactive policing is preventing going out there talking to the community. And this is why LAPD is a train wreck. Troy don't know what's going on. I don't know, Randolph, if you know what's going on. A lot of questions that he asked you, you didn't know what was going on and things like that. Who is running LAPD? You know, and I want to know. It's making Karen Bass look really, really bad. 911's a train wreck when you call them. It takes an hour and 15 minutes to get to you. Well, I mean, what's the deal with that? You know, I'm very concerned. Vice President Schill, like I said, I need to sit down and have lunch with you. I heard that you was a pretty decent person, so I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. You know. Not long as I go to lunch, but long as I can talk to her and we can get things done. You know, LAPD is based ran on the city's money. You know, we pay for this every time you go to the market. They take tax out your money. You pay these guys for doing what they're supposed to do. There's no ins and outs about it, but if you don't make achievements and you don't make accomplishments and you don't know who's running the LAPD, we're in a world of trouble. I mean, and this is how people get shot. This is how things come up because don't nobody know what's going on. Shields, here's my card. Give it to her, please. And I'll be waiting for your phone call.
Thank you.
Mona M.
Hello there. All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to point out two systemic issues of concern for LAPD. One, LAPD is providing private security for the Church of Scientology. And two, the Church of Scientology is trying to pin hate crimes on their protesters. The number one, let me set the scene. P. Diddy is having a screen showing at his house. There is a permit to close off the block and hire security for it. Is LAPD really going to let their armed officers provide security for such an event? It may not be a clear violation of your oath to protect and serve, but it certainly has negative connotations to it, to be in front of P. Diddy's house. What? Am I comparing the Church of Scientology to P. Diddy? Yes, I am. You are saying you don't have receipts. Yes, you do. You just are not listening. There should not be one more officer placed in front of the Church of Scientology for overtime duty until these serious allegations are dealt with. They have enough money, they can hire private third-party security vendors instead of LAPD, which is just an intimidation tactic. Number two, you are being lied to from COS. The protesters, yes, those really scary protesters that are barbecuing, chalk writing, yelling, and placing signs, many of them are survivors of abuse. Exactly what P. Diddy did, except for they have all the blessings of the COS. COS is trying to pull the smoke and mirror trick to prove that the protesters, what they're doing is a hate crime. Nothing could be further from the truth. The people protesting are as eclectic and varied as the beliefs they believe. Those shouts should be a warning to you. There are children being abused physically, mentally, and sexually behind those blue walls. Not times past, today. Before the end of the day today, there will be another child added to the list of abused. Tomorrow is Groundhog's Day. Now, a few minutes ago, you were labeled complicit. Now you're culpable of Scientology's crimes because you know. You will be held accountable for turning away from the protesters' screams. In closing, shouting to the rooftops to speak for those that can't speak for themselves is not a hate crime. It is a proclamation of love. Telling the truth in a public forum that can't be ignored, #KidsCan'tConsent. When will the LAPD take responsibility for protecting the children? You say you need proof. Open your eyes and your ears and be acceptable to the truth. I am not too sure why this is happening.
The next speaker, Elizabeth Howell Egan.
Hello, I'm here to speak on all items. I'm particularly here to speak against suspicious activity reporting and to demand Errol Souther's removal from this board. SAR is a product of racist post 9/11 counterterrorism policies, including Errol's CVE framework, and employs pseudoscientific behavioral surveillance. Behavioral surveillance and SAR create a culture of suspicion, paranoia, and fear used to deputize community members to criminalize Black and Brown communities and their neighbors. On top of that, it replicates and perpetuates the stalker state that LAPD so very loves. SARs can lead to a lifetime of criminalization and are uploaded to fusion centers, which have been called useless, flawed, irrelevant, outdated, duplicative, and potentially violative of civil rights by a U.S. Senate report. On top of all of this, there were only 22 SARs in the most recent audit. So clearly SARs don't work, their popularity is waning, and continuing to rebrand SAR as a way to surveil and criminalize youth through the Lazar app has to end. Finally, Errol Southers must be removed as president of this commission. You're a threat to USC students and our communities with your repressive, violent policies that criminalize dissent. I'm absolutely disgusted to be affiliated with an institution that also affiliates with you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Matios Kadei.
My name is Matios Kirana with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. Repeating a lot of what was said, the SAR came about, and this is a local manifestation of the National Suspicious Activity Reporting Program, which came about post 9/11 after the construction of the information sharing environment. And the objective with this program is to employ behavioral surveillance, which, as the last speaker said, is a pseudoscientific practice to gather information, to feed this information sharing environment. Behavioral surveillance as a practice is effectively saying, you can judge behavior to indicate criminality. And this program defines suspicious behavior as anything that's reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning of terrorist or criminal activity. That's a ridiculous kind of definition. And this has been widely delegitimized, this whole notion of behavioral surveillance as being a real practice. The National Academy of Science, by no means a radical body, concluded that, quote, there is no specific consensus on whether these techniques are ready for operational use in counterterrorism. Which begs the question, if it's not good for counterterrorism, it's not good for crime prevention, what is it good for? Why weaponize the general public for mass information gathering? Why weaponize the general public's inherent biases, their willingness to anonymously report, their willingness to stereotype and to profile, to Errol Southers' celebration, I'm sure? Because behavioral surveillance is simply a proxy for racial profiling, and police want to racially profile. We have a piece from Errol Southers himself where he celebrates behavioral profiling, which again is just a proxy for racial profiling. And the public recognizes this. As the last speaker kind of pointed out, this program has been rebranded and kind of retried over and over again. We see that it's a hollow carcass of what it was. This audit itself highlights how there's been a 91% decrease in anonymous reports. This program has been rebranded as Special Order 11, Special Order 1, Special Order 17, and then Special Order 2 in 2020, where they removed the yearly audit requirement. But by then, it was already 2 years too late. We're 5 years since an audit at this point. And so we have an iWatch LA app that came about from this program with an abysmal 1.1 star rating in the App Store. And yet, the LAPD still cited this program in their proposal for the Department of Homeland Security's Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention Grant, and they called it a, quote, huge success. By what metric? In what way is this a success? And I'll say, it has been successful in normalizing behavioral surveillance, right? A model of mass suspicion, a building block of all these other programs. LAPD is providing alternatives to hinder extremism program, which surveils youth. These CVE frameworks, Errol Southers has his own, by the way. It's called Homegrown Violent Extremism, which criminalizes black youth specifically. And that's all it's really done. It's gotten funding for the LAPD, and it's legitimized racial profiling. Lastly, on the conversation around facial recognition technology, the photo comparative technology policies that came into place in early 2021 came about because the LAPD was found out by the LA Times for using FRT. And it's important to note the mechanics of this have not changed by any means. The LAPD is still adding photographs.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the next speaker.
The next speaker is Megan. The next speaker, please, Megan.
Okay, so this is a quote from the Review of Suspicious Activities Reports. Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. And honestly, the first people I thought of that fit that description was the California Highway Patrol. This quote is from the article titled, "CHP isn't supposed to aim less lethal munitions at protesters' heads and fire into crowds. It did at UCLA. It's by Cal Matters. A review of Cal Matters video from inside the encampment documented at least 25 instances in which those officers appear to aim their weapons at the eye level of protesters or fired them into crowds that didn't appear to present an immediate threat to life or serious injury. Yeah, so many videos on social media of this clearly documenting terroristic behavior, but LAPD is never going to issue a suspicious activity report for the CHP because who you deem a terrorist has everything to do with political viewpoint and who you want to control and who you want to protect. It's part of what makes this body fascist. Another part of the fascism of LAPD in this commission is its violent suppression of opposition to your power. At the last community meeting, speakers were censored for criticizing Errol, told they were off topic, and when they refused to give up their rightful public comment time, were forcibly ejected from the meeting by men with guns. One of the things those speakers were criticizing is the fact that Errol was a key decision maker to censor the USC valedictorian who because she was pro-Palestinian, was deemed too dangerous to speak. Errol has a deep relationship with and admiration for the Israeli Defense Force. He many times has extolled their excellent use of profiling. In his paper, Characteristics of Homegrown Violent Extremist Radicalization, he lists anger towards the United States and a perception of Muslims being victimized by the United States as characteristics of radicalization. It's no wonder then that LAPD was nowhere to be found when a pro-Israeli mob made up, we now know, almost entirely of non-students and including both former and future IDF soldiers, viciously beat UCLA pro-Palestine students with pipes and planks. Actual terrorism, actual violence. And yet the very next night, LAPD violently arrested those same students for refusing to quit their peaceful protest of their school's complicity in funding a genocide being committed by Israel and its defense force. Errol, you have spent your life claiming to be an expert on terrorism because you are a terrorist, sir, and you support terrorists. It's definitional in your own manual. You use and run cover for an armed force to intimidate civilians in furtherance of your political objectives. Thanks.
The next speaker, please, Mark. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, hello, my name is Mark Witschke. I live at 801 South Grand Avenue. I've lived and worked in Los Angeles since 1989, mostly downtown. I'm a retired teacher from LAUSD. As a citizen and taxpayer of Los Angeles, I object strenuously to my tax dollars used to send the LAPD in force to attack and arrest peaceful protesters at USC and UCLA in the past few weeks. I call upon the commission to immediately arrange hearings to determine the following. How much did the LAPD invasion of these campuses cost the LA taxpayers? Who made the decision to send the LAPD forces to these campuses? Why did the decision maker decide that the machinations of an incompetent institutional bureaucracy overrode U.S. constitutional provisions that protect free speech and assembly? What jurisdiction did the LAPD have to go on private property to be the hired gendarmes of a private institution in the case of USC, and in the case of UCLA to enter state property, and in both cases to cause violence and harm to those exercising their American constitutional rights? Why did LAPD officers stand by while peaceful protesters were attacked by a vicious mob for hours at UCLA, and then the next morning helped to complete the mob's work by attacking the protesters themselves, manhandling them, and sending many to the hospitals, just as they did at USC? Why isn't the LAPD arresting the law-breaking violent attackers against UCLA protesters, whose identities were submitted to the LAPD by many entities, including CNN, and whose activities are clear on video, freely available on the internet? The public has a right to this information on the conduct and costs of its police force. The hearing should be open to the public, held soon, and by a special panel that consists of citizens more representative of the public than political appointees, corporate attorneys, former prosecutors, and former SWAT officers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, the final speaker, Shay Conway.
Thank you all for the work you do. I just wanted to make a comment about the sweeps that check the registration. I have a personal experience. I just wanted to say that when they do the sweeps, if the owner is if the vehicle is a tenant, that they should or if they put a note or put the hood up, just they should have some compassion for the owners, because sometimes the car serves as a heart. That's my comment. It adds duress and it affects so many different parts of our lives, the car. So I just wanted to make the comment that when they do the sweeps, they should have compassion and consider the person who owns it, and if they're present or they have, they can see. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have Chief Randolph follow up? I kind of want to get more information about what she's talking about. We can have staff follow up. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, please announce the last speaker.
The last speaker is Patricia Mendoza.
Good morning to the commissioners and to the public. I wanted to say that last week I was here and I was taken care of very well. A plus, I got my reports and I went right away to Social Security. So they're gonna take care of everything. I also wanted to share with the president. The Metro does have private securities, and you only see them maybe once a week, and they send them to the end of the red line where you exit. And when you see these security guards, let me tell you, you will get scared. They're about 10 feet tall. They're like this, like the same body type of the movie of the Lord of the Rings. You never see them coming towards to LA. But I think they're private securities and you only see them there. I saw them for like the past 3 years during the pandemic. But the Metro doesn't send their security guards anywhere else, just the dead end of the red line. And also you mentioned about the young guy that got beaten up, Rios. They caught one guy, they're looking for 2 more. I also wanted to share with the public, and I hope you guys don't take it personal. I was born and raised here in downtown on Temple and Beaudry. My mother worked 40 years in downtown in a sewing factory, and I worked in the law office for 30 years. I grew up in a community that people call it ghetto, you know, and they say we don't deserve a high school or other things, but I want to talk about the protesters at USC and all over the world. It's obvious everything is planned. I respect people that believe in something, they're going to protest, but there's a way of protesting where you get a permission from the LAPD and you tell them, can we protest at a certain time and date in these streets or in these private properties? Do we have your permission? It's being respectful and civil. And at the end of the day, I don't believe in vandalism. And I ask the LAPD next time, you call the military. You waited too long, because at the end of the day, I saw the CNN channels late. The last group at USC, they were about to push the LAPD, and I saw older LAPD police officers who were probably about to close to retiring, and they were pushing each other. If I would have saw my son or my daughter in that crowd, I would have went personally, kicked their ass, and have that police officer arrest my daughter and my son. You know, so you need to next time deal with the military. You let too many days go by. There's a lot of crazy things going on all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please announce the remaining 2 speakers in person.
The next speaker is Michelle, followed by Adam Smith.
Are you an oversight commission? Is that what you are? Okay, there's another report that came out today besides the SAR report. Let me read something from the title. Nearly a third of LAPD shootings since 2017 involved a person in a mental health crisis. 31% since 2017. Fortunately, I was listening to LAist, which produced this report as I was driving here. And do you know what? One of your friends was on it. Do you know Jeffrey Winninger? He is a recently retired LAPD lieutenant with expertise in the use of force. He served on the LAP Force Investigation Division. Do you know what he said when he was asked, why don't LAPD understand that when they approach a person who is having a mental crisis, that they will make the situation worse? Do you know what he said? It's not about training. It's about culture. And the culture is militaristic. That's what he said. He's been involved in this. He's investigated. He knows from the inside. And he has very little hope that you're going to do the right thing, which is keep the LAPD away from people in mental crisis. By the way, this 31% is only what the police identified as people in a mental crisis. So the statistics are probably much higher. We had some examples of them today. And you're going to shoot a rubber bullet in the abdomen of someone who has a 3-inch knife. Give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking break. This department, one of my friends who's very conservative, and I just tell her stories about what goes on, and she says, this is like a military occupation. Yes, you've been hearing from people all this morning, ordinary people who have been treated badly by this department. This department has a horrible reputation in the community. It needs to.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please announce. the
Adam
next speaker.
Smith, please.
Good morning. Good morning. I guess I'll start with the chief's report. Oh, all items. And did I have to say that, or did you just assume that? Becky's got me. On one hand, I was happy that you brought up the brutal assault by Zionists and white nationalists and assorted, hateful pieces of shit at UCLA, Rasha Shields. On the other hand, and correct me if I misheard, but you mentioned in the pro-Palestinian encampment, you mentioned protesters who I think you described as Arab American and Muslim students, which is definitely true. But when I went a couple weeks ago with my kids and delivered ice and some other supplies that folks were looking for, and met and know there were a lot more than I met Jewish students, right? And so I think in these conversations, omitting the fact that there are Jewish students fighting against this genocide all over the country and all over the world, at worst, hides the solidarity that exists for anti-genocide solidarity across the world, but at worst, it does like the dirty, dirty, insidious, violent work of ultimately conflating Judaism and Zionism. So I just wanted to lift that up. I don't know what your history is, former federal prosecutor, around like policing and law enforcement. But in that question to the chief, you asked about, you know, what's the investigation look like? Are any of these people who we all know who they are? Is anything going to happen to them? I don't know if in your history as a federal prosecutor or being around law enforcement for your career, have you ever looked into like what gets criminalized? What crimes, so-called crimes, do police solve? Which ones don't they solve? Who are the communities that end up being criminalized? What and for what do those communities are they criminalized? I did not mean to spend 2.5 minutes on that. I think, speaking of communities that are routinely criminalized, when you think about SAR, suspicious activity reporting, you know, behavioral surveillance is always a proxy for racial profiling. A report from the IG here in March 2013 showed that in a 4-month sample, over 82% of SARs were filed on individuals belonging to racial groups identified as non-white, and the largest number of SARs were filed on Black people.
Thank you. That'll be the end of public comment. I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Kalanche's announcement of the Youth Community Input Forum on the 23rd. There will also be forums on May 24th, May 30th, June 3rd, June 6th, and June 13th. That information will be available on the website. We now move on to item number 3, consent agenda items. We have items A through E. Are there any comments or questions on those items? May I finish speaking, sir? Then you may leave. Okay, you can finish. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on items A through E? Okay. I'm going to pull item E, then I would move that we adopt the recommendation for board action on items A through D. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. On item E, and if we could have Executive Director Sibley respond to these questions. If you look at the fees for special services, on page 5 of that report, just 2 questions. I just wanted to know why were the number of requests for photographs on that report not tracked?
My understanding is that the department did not track that, but I'm going to ask Commission staff to come up and see if they have a more detailed response to that question, Commissioner. Jane, if you could.
And correction, it's actually page 6.
Commissioner Suthers, Records and Information Division have not tracked those reports in years. It's not part of their practice to do that. They just are keeping track of the main arrests, crime reports, traffic reports, and clearance detention letters, as well as criminal record arrest summaries.
Okay. The other question I have is regarding the previous page, which is page 5. There's a significant decrease between fiscal year 22 and 23 in 2 items, the request for clearance detention letters and criminal record arrest summaries. Is there a particular reason for that?
The decrease in,
Clearance detention letters and the decrease in criminal record arrest summaries in the fiscal years 22, 23.
R&I has not provided any specific reason. There is some fluctuation from year to year. Basically, yeah, there's no specific reason for that provided.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on item 3E? Hearing none, I move that we adopt the recommendation for board action. Is there a second?
I move.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We'll now move on to item number 4, regular agenda items. We have the Inspector General's report relative to review of suspicious activity reports. Chief Kowalski and staff.
Good morning, commissioners, department members, staff, and all in attendance at today's meeting. As Deputy Chief Kowalski steps up to the table, I'd like to also introduce from the Office of Inspector General, Assistant Inspector General Brian Buckner, and Police Performance Auditor 4, John Grosdidier, who were the key authors of this project. As they will shortly tell you about our report, at the direction of this commission, the OIG looked into 2 years of SARs that were received and processed by the department, 2022 and 2023. Our report was intended to look for compliance with all the rules governing the processing of those SARs by this department. We also looked at comparatively trends in the number of SARs being received by the department going back, I believe, 7 and possibly 8 years, and compared them with what is happening currently. We did reach a couple of recommendations on how we believe things can be done better. And to talk to you about those in a little bit more detail, I'll turn this over to Assistant Inspector General Brian Buckner.
Good morning, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, Commissioners, Chief Randolph, Mr. Sibley, Mr. Smith, Mr. De La Guerra, and Madam Secretary. My name is Brian Buckner. I'm the Assistant Inspector General over the OIG's audit section. With me today is the lead auditor and lead author of this report, Police Performance Auditor 4, John Grosdidier. I would also like to thank, he's not here with us today, but Police Performance Auditor 3, Robert Kawabata, provided additional support for this report. So before you, as the Inspector General noted, is the OIG's audit of suspicious activity reports for calendar years 2022 and 2023. I want to thank my staff, but also I want to thank the department for their responsiveness and feedback provided throughout this audit. In particular, I'd like to thank Deputy Chief Kowalski, Commander Paulson, Captain Curtin, Lieutenant Garland, Sergeant Legaspi, and Sergeant Vega. We conducted an audit of all suspicious activity reports that were received and processed by the department in those 2 calendar years. That included a total of 45 such reports, 23 reports in calendar year 2022 and 22 reports in calendar year 2023. Before I turn it over to Mr. Grosdidier, I just want to mention, as noted by the Inspector General, the report led to 3 ultimate recommendations for the Commission to consider. 2 of the recommendations are directions to the department for action, and I will discuss them briefly. And then the 3rd recommendation is direction to the Inspector General's office. As a part of our analysis, we broke down all of the suspicious activity reports into a number of different factors. To name a few, we identified and analyzed the potential target type, the race and gender, and the perceived race and gender of both the named and identified involved persons, as well as the unnamed and unidentified involved persons, and also the disposition of each report broken down by LAPD division. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Grosdidier.
Yes, hi, good morning, Commission. First, I'd like to give a little bit of background and then about the Suspicious Activity Report program, and then secondly, discuss a little bit about the review itself. September 11th, 2001, the greatest, most significant terrorist event in U.S. history. We had 4 planes hijacked. They struck 3 major buildings, the 2 World Trade Center buildings, the Pentagon. Thousands of people died both that day of September 11th as well as months and years later, mostly through respiratory diseases and problems. So the 2 questions that everyone asked, including the federal government, is number 1, how could this occur in America? And secondly, why wasn't it prevented? why didn't we do what we needed to do to prevent it? So as a result of these questions, the federal government created this 9/11 commission to try to study this. And after years of studying, really there's many conclusions, but two of the major findings were, one, there was really a lack of effective, efficient way for members of the public to even report suspicious activities that may have a nexus to terrorism planning. And secondly, even if they did report these suspicious activities, there was no sharing among government or law enforcement at all different levels. There was no sharing between municipal, county, state, federal, tribal, school, no sharing. So again, the question then was, well, how do they address these deficiencies? Well, it took them 8 years, but in 2009, the federal government created the SAR initiative, again, with the intention that suspicious activity reports would be initiated and prepared, and the related information, intelligence would be shared with law enforcement and the government to, again, hopefully try to prevent some of this in the future. And so give you a little bit about what a SAR is. I mean, a suspicious activity report, it must contain at least one of 18 types of suspicious activity. And again, these activities should have some type of nexus to terrorism planning. Now, some of these activities may be criminal in nature on the face, like theft or security breaches or trespassing. It's a crime in and of itself. Others may not be. They may be suspicious, but there's really no criminality. Like, for example, photography, videos. It may be suspicious when and why they're doing that, or where but again, that on the surface is not criminal. So these suspicious activity reports, some of the information they contain, again, potential targets. I say potential, they don't know. The reporting person, the dates, the involved person. Now, the involved person may be, again, they don't call it a suspect because it may not be criminal activity. The involved person may be someone they can actually identify by name and address, or it may not be. They may not know who this involved person is. So once these suspicious activity reports are prepared, they are then sent to Major Crimes Division of our Counterterrorism Bureau, and then Major Crimes Division diligently reviews these, and they determine whether they believe it should be affirmed or unfounded. If it's affirmed, it is sent to the Joint Regional Information Center in Norwalk, and then they in turn would share it with the FBI, and then those entities would do further investigation or contact LAPD in some cases for additional information. So that's how the process is supposed to work. And now again, these SARs, typically they're initiated by a member of the public. Now, the member of the public, they may call 911, they may go to a LAPD station front desk, they may flag down an LAPD officer that they see in the field, or they may submit online through the iWatch program. Now, some of the SARs could actually be initiated directly by LAPD officers in the field. They may be making a pedestrian stop or a vehicle stop. They may be arresting someone for some other offense, and then as they're gathering evidence, they're seeing evidence that might be related to the terrorism planning as apart from the crime itself they're being arrested from. So that's, again, general background about the program. Now, our particular review, as Brian and Mark noted, we reviewed all 45 that were actually processed by the LAPD in 2022 and 2023. So again, this would be the universe of all SARs processed. Of these 45 SARs, 29 of them were affirmed by Major Crimes Division and LAPD management and sent to JRIC and the FBI. For those, we reviewed to see, okay, was it reasonable that there was a nexus to terrorism planning? Is that a reasonable position that LAPD took? And then, but of the 45 SARs, 16 were unfounded. And we also reviewed those asking kind of the reverse question, was it appropriate and reasonable that LAPD decided to unfound the SAR and not send it on to JRIC and the FBI, realizing that, of course, if it turns out that they were wrong and there's some related terrorism activity, that's a really unfortunate thing. But so we reviewed both ways. Also, as I mentioned, some of these involve persons. Sometimes they might be an identified person that the LAPD actually makes contact with. So if they were making contact with these IPs, then the question is, was it a lawful contact? If it was a detention, were they lawfully detained? Did they have reasonable suspicion of a crime? Likewise, if they were searched, was it reasonable to search this person? Was it a lawful search? And then also, fortunately, in recent years now, the LAPD has the benefit of this body-worn video as well as digital in-car video, which is pretty much now with all LAPD officers in the field. So that was another question or another test is, did the officers actually activate the body-worn video during these contacts with these involved person during the entire contact? Did they capture the entire contact? And so in reviewing those tests, we did find pretty much 100% compliance in that we felt that all SARs that were affirmed, it was reasonable to affirm them. The SARs that were unfounded, that was reasonable to unfound them. The detentions, the searches were lawful, and the body-worn video, the digital in-car video activations were complete with one exception. There were 2 officers that did activate it late, and they did not capture the contact with the involved person. Fortunately, there was a 3rd officer on scene that did activate the body-worn video. Because of this 3rd officer, we were able to capture and review the entire contact with the involved person. So having done that review, there were some findings and some recommendations. I'll let Brian talk more about the recommendations. Is again, I guess you'd say the finding results is, as I mentioned, 100% compliance. So that is a good thing, with exception of that one exception with the body-worn video. We did find an absence of a log that there was no really record or logging. They kept all the SARs in the paper files, but there was no master log or tracking database or anything to actually show all the SARs as they're coming in. Now, part of the reason for this is in 2009, LAPD made the decision to terminate their contract with Palantir, which had been used for many, many things, from detectives for investigations, and it was also used as their SARS tracking system, their database. So once Palantir was discontinued in 2019, there was really no other manual system or electronic system for recording these SARs received and processed. And again, the other kind of result or finding, which we've mentioned in the report, is yes, there's been a significant decrease in the number of SARs. When we started doing these reviews, our OIG even before in 2010 or so, we were seeing over 300 SARs a year. But now here we are in 2022 and 23, and there's only 23, 22 a year. There's many possible reasons for this decrease. We even, spoke with our LAPD management as well as even FBI contacts to try to get some understanding why there's such a significant decrease. And again, the report indicates some of the possible reasons for this decrease, but we can't actually absolutely determine why it's been so significant. So again, those are the background, the findings. I'll let Brian talk about the recommendations.
Sure. Thank you, John. And as I mentioned, this report ultimately resulted in 3 recommendations for the Commission's consideration. The first 2 for the department. The first was, as John mentioned, one of the findings in our report was that John had to go over to Major Crimes Division and review by hand all of these reports. And there was no central log that tracked or recorded all of the suspicious reports or suspicious activity reports that the department had received and processed. So our recommendation was that the department create such a log for ease of tracking and auditing by the OIG. Second recommendation that the department annually certify to this board the number of SARs that it receives each year, and then provide such a log to the OIG, again, as a part of just the OIG and Commission's oversight of the department. And then lastly, our recommendation for the Commission with respect to the Inspector General's office and the frequency of such our SARS reports or audits going forward would be that the OIG at its discretion conduct such audits either if we see an increase in the number of SARs that the department begins to receive going forward, or of course, as always, at the discretion of the Commission. With that, answer any questions the Commission might have.
Thank you very much. I'll open up for questions and comments. We'll start with Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. I have a couple of, well, first, a clarification. What was the third recommendation?
The third recommendation was that the Inspector General's office would, at its discretion, conduct future SARS audits, either if we see an increase in the number of SARS reports going forward, or of course, as always, at the direction of the commission.
Okay. Can you, or maybe staff, LAPD command staff, walk me through when there is the process of where somebody calls in a suspicious, a potential SAR, right? Like, what is the process like?
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you.
Good morning, and just before I answer that question, just to add, I'd like to add just a couple comments to the Office of Inspector General. And, I'm Deputy Chief David Kowalski. This is from Major Crimes Division, Lieutenant David Garland. He's here as well. And as stated, we did work closely with the Office of Inspector General on the SAR. And just a couple further comments. This is a valuable tool for the community, and it's a mechanism for reporting potential threats. We talked about acts of terrorism, but it's important that we continue to evaluate and critique the indicators of pre-operational planning that are used to determine if further investigation is warranted. And these reports, as stated by the OIG, must be based on pre-identified articulable behaviors that have been linked to historical patterns of terrorist planning. With the reporting guidelines and the supporting training programs we have for our law enforcement personnel, they're designed specifically to ensure that there is absolutely no infringement on constitutionally protected activities. We agree with the recommendations brought forth by the OIG, and the two recommendations specific to LAPD will implement immediately. As far as your question, as far as a standard practice of where there's a starting point for suspicious activity report, there's a variety of methods. You mentioned one way. We rely on the community. Whether it's a suspicious activity report or some type of tip on any type of behavior, we take those very seriously. An example of those would be if a person comes forth and talks about behaviors and activities that they've seen by someone they either know or don't know. That person could live in their neighborhood. That person could be someone that they've seen in front of a business that could be, at risk as a target or attack, such as a church or a high-value target like an arena here in Los Angeles. And if a person comes forth, whether that's a radio call or through a front desk or through a phone call, we can start the process of listening to what they've described. And sometimes, as stated, this information doesn't rise to a criminal level, but it's behavior that's suspicious that may demonstrate indicators of someone that is plotting something. We would then, if I was a police officer, take that information, determine if the best format for that is on this type of report. That report would then be initiated by that officer describing the statements made by the community member. What we have implemented since 2020 and since the last audit was we updated and revised a special order specific to the SAR. What that requires is another level of vetting. So, for example, if you come forth down to Central Station and an officer takes that report, that is then presented to one of our watch commanders. The watch commander then is expected to call our on-call major crimes detective lieutenant, who can then evaluate and determine if a suspicious activity report is appropriate. So we give a telephonic approval, and then ultimately, as stated by the OIG, once that report is sent to Major Crimes Division, that first level of review there is we'll review the entire report and determine if it should be affirmed or unfounded at that level. We could then forward that report to our Fusion Center, the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, who collects it. And then even at that level, the JRIC or the FBI can determine if that report needs to be affirmed or unfounded. So there's several levels of review, which is why when you talk about the 45 described, 16 of those were unfounded. And we found at some point in that investigation that this didn't demonstrate enough information to move forward for a possible lead into an investigation or a follow-up. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. So a quick follow-up. How are we training? Because I'm assuming that the first contact is the patrol officer or someone at the station, right? It's not going to be, well, it's not going to be a detective or someone that's trained to identify these types of issues. So how is the department training our officers to know when you would refer this or take it up further?
It's an ongoing process. So first, when you look at the terrorism landscape, the Office of Inspector General clearly described the events of September 11, 2001. We have police officers on our department today who weren't born in 2001. And we have many people in federal law enforcement positions that weren't on the job or weren't even born then as well. So the way they view the events of 9/11 could be completely different. So we have to continue to educate our workforce in this. Also, the terrorism landscape, both in the United States and globally, has changed dramatically in the last 23 years. So the threats that we look for and indicators, although those remain the same, we still have to educate and update our workforce in that respect. We have a very young police department, as you know. Where we start is each geographical station has anywhere from 2 to 4 what we call TLOs, or terrorism liaison officers. And we have detective supervisors in our major crimes divisions that oversee the terrorism liaison officer program. So they're at the forefront of educating our police officers. There's also, from a managerial perspective, we have to remind our managers, captains that are out there that this is a very big part of your role as a commanding officer is to be aware of the terrorism liaison program in your respective area, and how are you going to not only educate your officers, but educate your community leaders, community police advisory boards. We would expect our terrorism liaison officers to come and educate our public on reporting tips and leads, whether that's terrorism related or not, how important it is if you see something, say something. So those parts are always presented to our police officers. And again, it's an ongoing process of education and training, and we ensure that those terrorism liaison officers are taking that ancillary duty seriously.
And then I guess to the flip side of that, are we also training our officers to ensure that we're not violating someone's rights? That we know when, identifying a potential suspicious, act that could be linked to terrorism is one thing, but also like knowing like the line that we wouldn't cross to ensure that we're not violating someone's
Yes,
rights.
and the Officer Inspector General mentioned in their report how since we started the suspicious activity report back in 2010, specific to LAPD, but since then we've added body-worn videos, and that's another way of not just taking a suspicious activity report and reviewing it. We now have the advantage of looking at the body-worn video and identifying what happened during that encounter with our police. And it is just like we would on any other stop. We use that as a training tool for our police officers and to talk about reasonable suspicion and indicators that they need to be looking for, consensual encounter versus a detention.
Last question. So when we determine that a tip or a whatever, a stop is deemed a SAR, do we immediately look at the body worn to determine the viability of it really being a suspicious act that needs to be reported? Or when do we look at the
Once we receive the report from the division, which is sent to us, we'll gain access to the body-worn video. So that's part of that review process that you talked about.
So it's done early in the process
Yes.
versus like when it gets audited?
Yes.
Right, okay. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you for the report, and I agree with the recommendations. I'm just curious, are there any, and maybe this is outside of the scope of the report, but any recommendations that have to do with the process that you all observed during the oversight of this report, the development of this report?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner. I believe the IG's office did not have any issues with the department's process for receiving and reviewing the SARs that come in, as the Deputy Chief mentioned. We didn't have any recommendations other than initiating a log or creating a log. That would be a better way for the department to track that. But once they receive and process each of the suspicious activity reports, the IG's office didn't identify any issues in the process.
Commissioner, if I could add to that just briefly, as I believe you're aware, the OIG has done past reports into this matter, and although I won't necessarily pull all of them up with their past recommendations, I do believe in the past that there were process issues that the OIG called for some correction on. The department did make those corrections. To give you one example that comes to mind, I believe for some time the department's paperwork, what was in the manual with regard to what constitutes one of these suspicious activities, had not been updated to match some changes in the federal law with those guidelines. We noticed that and said that it needed to be corrected, and the department did so. So in past reports, there has been some questions, some changes related to your question, I believe, but not in this one, as Mr. Buckner mentioned.
Thank you.
If I might just add to that, to the Inspector General's point, when in previous audits, we have taken these recommendations to change our vetting process. And one of those I mentioned to Commissioner Kalanche was the importance of adding a review process by the on-call major crimes lieutenant the day the incident occurs. So the expectation being that division will call and determine if that's the appropriate path for a report or not.
Okay, thank you. Also, on table 2, so you break down, or we have a breakdown of the reporting bureaus and divisions. Is that consistent with how it's been in years outside of 2022, 2023? From recollection, I know that's outside of the reporting period.
I would say it's been fairly consistent, and the West Bureau has always been overrepresented compared to other bureaus. You know, when you compare, violent crimes and things, West Bureau might not be as high, but they have always been kind of on the high end of the suspicious activity reports. I think could be largely because of all of the, synagogues and, Museum of Tolerance, Museum, Holocaust Museum. There have been quite a few reports over the years related to that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Vice President Shields.
Thank you, and thank you to Inspector General and staff for the thorough report. And one question I have, I think the current order does not require an annual audit by the Inspector General's office. Is that correct?
I believe that that's correct. There was some information in the initial sort of opening paragraph of the prior order, but not in the more recent 2020 amendment.
Okay, thank you. And the recommendation that you would have is for both the board and the Inspector General to essentially monitor if there's increases in these suspicious activity reporting, then potentially do additional audits as needed. Isn't that right?
Correct, both formally in the departments presenting annually the number of SARs that it receives and processes to this board, and then providing that same information to the Inspector General's office, correct.
Thank you. And I had a couple of questions for Deputy Chief Kowalski, just so that, again, we talk about this as suspicious activity. There's a definition, but I want a little bit more examples, because I will tell you, I'm mindful that, if I'm at the airport with my family speaking Arabic, that can be suspicious to some people, right? So suspicious activity can really be in the eye of the beholder. So how is it that, we are taking these reports? Can you talk a little bit about and give some examples, whether they don't have to be as specific in order to keep confidentiality, but what kinds of conduct have you found to be like founded suspicious activity versus the unfounded where someone is suspicious because they have foreigners talking around them?
I'm going to have Lieutenant Garland talk about those specific examples for you, but one thing I do want to emphasize and stress is race, ethnicity, national origin, religious affiliation. Those are not factors when we determine whether a SAR should be completed. It's based on behaviors, suspicious activities that we deem concerning for potential pre-planning. Specific to this audit and some of those examples, I'll defer to Lieutenant Garland.
Thank you, sir. So the criminal activity, the 18 different sections would be what we're looking at to vet out. Can you hear me okay? To vet out whether or not to complete a suspicious activity report. So your example, if you go to the airport speaking Arabic, does it rise to a level of suspicious activity report that we would report or take one on? If a patrol officer or a TSA officer believes that something is suspicious, that phone call would come to Major Crimes Division now. That was one of the features that was put in the 2020 Special Order Number 2 to vet it out. And I think that's why you see such a decrease in our suspicious activity report numbers. So in your example, we would immediately say that there's no nexus to terrorism activity. There wouldn't be anything for us to document. Another example would be at the beginning of the war with Ukraine and Russia. Someone had called and said that there's a Russian gentleman that was putting several canisters of gasoline in the back of his pickup truck. Again, not a suspicious, it's suspicious activity that we would look at, but it turned out he just needed extra fuel for a generator that he was running. So it wasn't activity that would lead to pre-planning or pre-operational type activity that would concern the police department or generally for the public. What was your other question on that, ma'am?
Can you provide some types of examples of what has been deemed as founded suspicious activity?
So anybody that, if we find firearms, explosives, things of that nature that don't meet a criminal predicate, that would be deemed suspicious activity that might lead to pre-planning of something. A manifesto in itself that might not rise to the level of a crime, but they're detailing out what they could do or what they would do. One of the things that we did at Major Crimes Division was with the threats of school violence. Majority of those don't meet any criteria for criminal activity, but it's important for us to document what had happened and that we vetted it out that it wasn't. In 2022, we had 182 criminal or threat reports to schools within the city of Los Angeles. All of those were vetted out to be non-crimes, which is why they ended up having an incident report. But those are the type of activities that you would normally find on a SAW report, but they just didn't meet the criteria.
Another sort of real-time example, I talk about the threat picture continues to evolve and change in the United States and globally. One of those might be the critical infrastructure, electrical grid. We've seen examples throughout the country over the last 3 years where people have targeted an electrical grid to create that chaos in a city or region. If we have persons in and around electrical grid areas for taking photographs, being evasive and sort of the why they're there, that information you could link to events that are happening on a national landscape, being a real-time example.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Just two questions on the recommendations. Actually, one question on the two recommendations. On the second one, you've stated that the department shall annually certify to the Board of Police Commissioners the number of SARs received and processed throughout the calendar year. The third recommendation says that the OIG will conduct audits of the SAR process at its discretion. For example, if it observes a significant increase. So statistically, what would be a significant increase for you to that would trigger an audit?
Commissioner, I think the recommendation really focuses on that discretion. So really for this commission in particular, but also the OIG on our own to sort of make that determination. I'm not sure we would hold it to a specific number standard to have a particular percentage rate by which we would make that decision. But by having the numbers reported annually, to be able to see, as I mentioned, what we saw in this report was a continuation of a longstanding 7-8 year precipitous decline in the number of SARs that were being reported and processed at all. I think by having the numbers reported each year, the oversight of this commission and the OIG, both together and independently, would allow us to sort of just make judgment calls to say something is changing here that we want to look into further, as opposed to having a specific standard set for only when it meets a particular threshold.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, comment, the department separated or terminated any contract or agreement with Palantir 15 years ago, correct? In 2009?
19.
2019? Okay. And no longer has a relationship with Palantir? Okay, thank you. With that, I would move that we approve the Inspector General's report. Is there a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We'll now move on to item number 4, the regular agenda items, Department's report relative to the alternate response framework. Got Commander Embrick and Captain Valois.
You should really listen to public comment after every item. There's a lot to respond to there. Yeah, there sure is. A lot of it was
Hi, Captain.
They don't care about violating the Constitution. Look at the list. Look at the list.
Captain, the floor is yours.
The largest category of affirmed SARs were expressed or implied threats. Speaking Arabic could definitely be qualified as that.
Captain, go ahead. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning. I'm Captain Ray Valois, the commanding officer of LAPD Communications Division. With me here today is my subject matter expert, Senior PSR CT Fang. First, I'd like to extend my appreciation to Chief Choi and this morning Chief Randolph and all of the honorable members of the Police Board of Commissioners for your role in ensuring the community's safety and security. I'd also like to recognize 2 of our city partners that are here this morning in support of alternate response. To begin with, there's Vanessa Willis and Mr. Andre Herndon from the CAO's office. They are currently administering the current UMCR program, the Unarmed Model of Crisis Response. And with them is Ms. Shannon Pryor from the Mayor's Office, who oversees the City's Circle program. The report that you have dated May 15th of 2024 is in response to a request from City Council for the department to develop and launch an Unarmed Model of Crisis Response, or UMCR. Working very closely with the Mayor's Office and the CAO, a pilot program was begun on March 12th of this year. This program is in 3 geographical divisions, which is Wilshire, Southeast, and Devonshire, and it's 24/7, 365. Now, in support of this program, Communications Division, again, working with and closely with our partners at the CAO's office and the Mayor's Office, drafted a divisional order that delineated the criteria for calls diverted to UMCR and circumstances that calls for service would not be diverted. The types of calls that are diverted to UMCR are well-being checks, indecent exposure, not engaged in lewd conduct, intoxication, not actively operating a vehicle, disturbances, and mental health crises. Now, the exclusionary criteria for calls that would not be diverted are a violent crime in progress, an immediate threat of violence, if there are weapons involved, the incident requires medical attention, the person involved is confirmed to be under the age of 18, and there are 3 or more individuals involved. Now, in the roughly 10 weeks since the implementation of the UMCR program, approximately 972 calls for service have been diverted. Of those 972, 52 calls for service, or 5%, have been redirected back for police response. So therefore, they are able to handle roughly 95% of the calls that have been diverted. Now, as we continue with the pilot program, we are meeting monthly with the CAO's office and the mayor's office to discuss any issues that arise in order to ensure the success of this alternate response programs. At our last meeting, which was last Monday, May 13th, it was noted that there is a capacity to expand the number of diverted calls. And it was agreed that we form a working group in order to explore the feasibility of diverting additional calls for service to this alternate response. So thank you, honorable members of the Police Commission and Chief Randolph, for allowing me the opportunity to share the progress we're making and the ongoing success of the city's alternative response program. I'm open to any questions you may have, and I can also provide some more detailed background of the diverted calls if you like.
Well, thank you for the report, and thank all of you for the hard work that you've been putting in to make this happen. The 95% of the calls diverted certainly is an incredible statistic. I'd like to first ask, if I may, on the expansion in the working group, would that mean expanding into additional divisions throughout the department, throughout the city?
That working group would be members of the CAO's office and members of my staff in order to identify what types of calls would be, additional types of calls would be diverted in those 3 divisions. So we're only 10 weeks into the program. It's pretty early on to talk about a greater expansion into other divisions.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Can I follow up on that question?
Please do.
What kinds of calls are bubbling up as potential that could be also in this list of diverted calls? Just an example of like something we didn't think about that we're like, oh, this potentially could be.
What I'd like to do is invite the rest of the staff to the table, please, because I can tell. Thank you.
I really have to compliment them. They have really driven this program and been wonderful partners.
Thank you very much. Oh, your mic, and just identify yourself. And
I'm Vanessa Willis with the
Thank you.
CAO's office. We have identified a few additional call types that may be appropriate, like disputes, which are not currently included. Loitering is not currently included. Trespass is another that's not currently included.
Thank you.
Sorry. So, of these, thank you for that. Of these 972, what percentage of total calls is that?
Are you talking about total 911 calls?
Yeah. Because I know we get a lot of 911 calls.
Hi, Commissioner, Senior Peace Surfing Communications Division. So again, most calls of these are probably going to be non-emergency. So if they are coming in as 911 calls, the initial operators are probably going to be transferring that caller to a non-emergency line. So it's difficult to calculate as far as how many of those calls are technically 911 in origin. Of course, citizens can always call the 877 non-emergency line as well to report these type of activities. So again, most of these are not priority calls as far as narcotics. Disturbances are kind of general, so someone might be loitering in the Starbucks, refusing to leave, or just yelling, and someone's calling in. And so again, those are non-coded calls, so the 911 operators technically wouldn't handle it. They would just transfer it to a non-emergency line until another operator can answer that call.
So these 972 are coming from the non-emergency line? No, okay.
Both.
I'm sorry, it can either come from 911 line, get transferred to the non-emergency, or called directly by a citizen to the non-emergency line.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
that request our service, request to come.
To add more towards what Vanessa was just saying, is that, again, if a dispatcher does not divert that call initially, it'll still go to a patrol unit, and when the patrol unit arrives on scene, they can assess the situation, determine that either this person that's causing disturbance doesn't meet any criteria for a SMART or any kind of services, but they do need some kind of help, then the officers can request over the air, can have UMCR respond in these 3 divisions. And then that's also part of the 972 calls that's counted.
Got it. What I was getting at is trying to figure out how do we track data in a way that shows how much of, what percentage of calls are diverted. And I know that they go through different channels, but if there's a way to say, 40% of emergency calls or calls for service are actually going, to the alternative response. But I think that because it's hard to track, because there's different entry points and how they get distributed, but if you could think of a way that we can better track, I think it would help to show the impact of the program. That's all I was trying to get at.
It's still very early on. I think if we look at this as a crawl, walk, run, we have to start by crawling, and eventually we're going to add additional call types, and at some point in time expand geographically. The crawl, walk, and then at some point in time here in the future, we will be citywide.
Yeah, but
and it will
tracking
take
the
a lot
data
more
early
calls.
on will help us with funding to expand. So if we can figure out a way to track it, I think that would be.
Commissioner Calanche, if I can prompt something that might give this board some context. CT, do you mind sharing how many 911 calls we get? Give some perspective of how,
Yeah, I know.
small this is.
Well, daily 191 calls, just 911 emergency directly is average about 8,000 calls per day. So as far as being able to track those calls individually to actually determine which calls ends up being diverted is kind of difficult, as far as obviously would need to be created by the operator, for diversion. So any of those calls that either didn't get answered or didn't require dispatch, it wouldn't be counted. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or if I was doing like a data dive or wanted to fundraise for this program, I would figure out how to track in such a way that I could say potentially 60% more could be diverted, but we just don't have the resources to do that. That's what I'm trying to get at, is figuring out how to early on track. And that's kind of like other conversation, track, so we can say potentially this is what it could look like if we just had more resources, right? Because right now it looks like it's not even 1%, right? Based on, if you're getting, this many, 911 calls or calls for service. But that's what I'm getting at, is how do we figure out the numbers so that we would love to see this expanded, but we need to be able to have those numbers.
We do know that there is room for them to accept additional calls.
Okay.
And that's why we're looking at additional call types. It's also a learning curve
Right.
for our PSRs to understand the nuances of what calls can be sent to them and what shouldn't.
Got it. Okay. So there, for reals this time, I'm done.
Okay, before I go to Commissioner Garcia, so are we tracking, to follow up on Commissioner Calanche's comment and suggestion, are we tracking officer hours saved as we do with some of our other programs? Or can we do that?
That's extremely difficult to do because of the way the officers dispose their calls on their computers, whether or not they hang on to that call in their queue for a period of time or not.
I would add to that. that one of the advantages of UMCR is that the responders are able to stay on the scene for certain things much longer than a police officer might have time to do. Right now, I think our time, these are low acuity calls, so they're not, burning emergencies, but they are something that, folks can spend more time. They're trained on conflict resolution, substance abuse, de-escalation, and other things. So we've had calls that range from being there for a few minutes to a few hours. And so, it might be hard to calculate how much time is saved for officers that because they couldn't spend, 3 hours on scene resolving a conflict between a mother and a son, right? They have to, keep fighting crime. So I think that's a little bit of context I might add to that question.
That's good to know, and again, we should be tracking the officers, the staff on scene time perhaps is a number I know where Commissioner Kalanchi is going with this. We need the data to justify funding in terms of the efficacy of the program. And so we need real numbers. So that's great to know. That if we could track on-scene time by whoever's there, that might help bolster our case.
Our folks are averaging, and Vanessa can correct me if I'm wrong, about 35 minutes on scene for each call.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia.
Yeah, thank you for the report, and thank you all for leading the effort on building this. It's exciting to see it happen, and excited to see you all here in front of us and in front of it. I know I've run into you all over the years, and I know you know communities and understand some of the issues that communities deal with. And so my question is, are there plans? I understand there are plans with the work group to try to expand on call types. Are there plans to expand staffing itself? And with that question, how many staff do we currently have? And where and how quickly can we grow over the next couple of months or years?
We currently have two in each area, 2 teams 24/7. And expansion is, I'll let Andre take that one.
Right now, we have an allocation from the council to provide the service we have. So just a quick recap is that we've contracted with 3 service providers in each area that we serve. They are responsible for staffing their program. What we've asked is that 2 teams of 2 be available 24/7. So I think in terms of expanding that staffing model, it'll be a decision that has to be made down the road, probably after this pilot is concluded.
Can you share a little bit about what is the profile of the staff, whether education, training, lived experience?
Yes, sir. The staff, actually, the configuration varies amongst the providers. So there's one provider assigned to each area. And while they have different staffing models, they are generally staffed with either a behavioral or a mental health specialist, or supervised by a behavioral or mental health specialist, and then a peer support or community worker as well. They go out in teams of 2, so it will be one that is a clinician and one that is a peer support or community worker.
Okay. I'd love to learn more about the structure and the staff, and if you all have like monthly check-ins with the contractors and their staff, I'd love to be a part of it and really learn from them directly. What is it that they're responding to in their lens? What language they're using in terms of identifying what they're responding to outside of, I understand, the categories, but how do they speak about it? How do they see it? How do they view themselves in that situation? So if possible, I'd love to be a part of something like that. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Vice President Shields.
Thank you, and thank you for both the report and also for you all being here. I will say that I'm a huge proponent of the expansion of these types of programs, and it's great to hear kind of at the outset the success that you are already having. I think these programs, both improve the quality of life for people calling in for help and allows someone to attend as opposed to potentially get backburnered because of all of the more emergency calls that need to report on, and also reduces the footprint of an armed response, which is responding to some of the community concerns. And I can tell you that just from speaking to roll calls at various departments, whether it's Hollenbeck or North Hollywood, which if you're interested in expanding, those are all great places to potentially expand to, that the officers are welcoming this additional assistance. So it's not a competition by any stretch of the imagination. This is kind of like it takes a village, and you all are part of the village. So thank you for what you do. Because I think, even though 5% had to be redirected back, those were 920 incidences where people received service without requiring law enforcement. And so that's a terrific thing. And the more we're able to expand it in a safe manner, we don't want any, too much expansion into calls that may be more problematic. But I think these are all, a great thing. And so you have our full support in terms of, continuing to support these types of initiatives. So thank you for your leadership on that. I had a couple of questions. Just one is relating to kind of response time, like what can be expected for the calls that UMCR are responding to.
So in the program-wide, in all three areas, we are averaging a response time of 26 minutes. That does vary from area to area, but 26 minutes for all three.
Wonderful, thank you. And I had a question kind of about the PSR overload, because I feel like we may be asking a lot of our 911 operators of do they have a chart? Like if this happens, it's UMCR. If this happens, it's Circle. If this happens, it's SMART. How are we kind of managing this? Because especially when you're trying to react quickly, this may be a lot for them to process.
It is absolutely a lot for them to process. They've got to make a lot of decisions. I'll let CT further explain that since he's actually got the hands-on experience.
Once the UMCR program started, we did have kind of a chart, a single sheet chart where the operators can kind of put it on the side to monitor and be reminded of the type of calls that would be qualified for UMCR or Circle program or DD Hirsch. So it's broken down that way. But like everything else, when you're in a call, it's very fluid. So it's not much, the operators can't sit there and say, okay, this call, hold on, ma'am. Let me look at the sheet and determine what's going on. So the call is very fluid. So for the PSR, it is very difficult to be reminded that the two different programs, specifically Circle and UMCR, there are some differences with UMCR. Circle focusing primarily on PEH, persons experiencing homelessness, while UMCR is a very general to help anyone that would meet the requirement. So what's in place is kind of technology-wise within the system, it gives notes and reminders. Hey, within these three divisions, the UMCR program is available. It's up to the operator to be reminded that, oh, this call I'm creating within this division, I can divert that call. With Circle, it's the same thing. Within certain reporting districts, since they're not all division-wide, it's only very small parts of the division that are covered by Circle, it's the same thing. They have a note that once they complete the call, it tells them, hey, this RD is within the Circle area. Again, the operator has to be reminded these type of calls, which is non-emergency, dealing with PEH, dealing with disturbances, dealing with mental health that are non-critical, non-priority type calls, are they possible for diversion? So this way, it really kind of divides their mindset of priority 2, priority 3, coded calls, dispatch, non-coded call types. Okay, does it fall in any of these areas that might be divertible? And that's kind of how they work. They just try to remember these things as it goes.
Is there any kind of technological fix of when they're filling things? I don't know if they're inputting while the call is going of things popping up oh, this is Devonshire, this happens or anything like that yet?
Everything is towards after the call is over. Motorola, it's something we desperately would like, is something as they're typing, information is just popping up. But again, technology hasn't reached what, we would like as a operator yet.
We do have ongoing training, every day in roll call training. The UMCR program, they have been great about coming to our roll calls. I would say that it's more of an art form than a science, because no two calls or callers are the same. So they're always trying to pull out from that caller, draw out the different information. So it's more of an art form than a science,
Well,
but they're getting better.
Thank you.
Taking nothing away from the intuitive nature of how they do their job, because they do an incredible job. We did partner with the Government Performance Lab at the Harvard Kennedy School to develop the decision tree that CT referred to, and our office has committed to making regular visits, not only to PSR roll calls, but also patrol roll calls to share success stories, to hear about what issues might be happening in the field so we can adjust things as we move along.
Wonderful, great to hear. And I will say I've been derelict in my duties of visiting PSR. Please invite me to a roll call. I will be there to really commend the men and women who make up the backbone of the department. And I've been meaning to do that, but I would really love to kind of see them in action. And I hope that they know how much they are appreciated and how we need more of them. And hopefully we can help with any recruiting, because I know that is a strained department as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. And I could follow up on that. I know how difficult PSR work can be from personal experience. I think it would be useful for the PSRs to come before the commission at some point in the future, share in terms of an educational standpoint to the board and to the public what they do each day, how challenging it is, and how talented they are in triaging the information that comes in from a 911 call and calls they get all the time. I know on television and movies it looks really simple, and it's far from that. And I think it would be really useful for the public to understand how much work goes into deciding where that call goes. Can it go to an unarmed response or not? So we would really appreciate that. But thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for the report. With that, I would move that we approve the department's report and transmit to City Council. Is there a second?
I second.
Moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
The commission will now move on to item number 5 and recess into closed session. Thank you.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss Agenda Item 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Good afternoon. The commission has concluded closed session. We'll have a report out by the executive director. Mr. Sibley.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the regular meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners on May 21st, 2024, during closed session, the board adjudicated the case OIS 029-23 and made the following findings. For tactics, tactical debrief, 3 police officers, 2 by a 4-0 vote. For drawing and exhibition of a firearm, in policy, no further action, 2 police officers, 2 by a 4-0 vote. For less lethal use of force, in policy, no further action for 1 police officer, 2. And for a second police officer, 2, in policy, no further action for the first of 2 applications of less lethal force. And those findings were made on a 4-0 vote. On a third application of less lethal force by a police officer, 2, the finding made by the commission was out of policy, administrative disapproval, and that finding was made on a 3-1 vote. For the lethal use of force, the commission found in policy, no further action, 1 police officer, 2 on a 4-0 vote.
Thank you, sir. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.